have been on this stage many times as a presenter. I have sat in the audience.
In 1983, Elizabeth Taylor did something no Hollywood star had ever done before. She looked directly into the camera and confessed her darkest secrets. She admitted to being an alcoholic and pill addict. She told the world she took over 50 pills a day. She forged prescriptions and bribed drivers to pick up drugs from 5 different pharmacies. But her most shocking confession came later. She revealed details about her marriages that left audiences speechless. What she said about her famous husbands changed everything people thought they knew about her. Elizabeth Taylor was born in London on 27 February 1932. She was just a little girl when the world around her started to change. War was coming. In April 1939, her godfather, Sir John Cazalet, invited the Taylor family for tea with Winston Churchill. That afternoon, Churchill didn't speak softly. He warned them clearly. He told Elizabeth's father to get the family out of London before bombs started falling. Just 5 weeks later, her mother Sarah packed up Elizabeth and her brother Howard, boarded the SS Manhattan, and sailed for America. Elizabeth was only 7 years old. Her father stayed behind to close his art gallery. The trip across the Atlantic was rough. Waves crashed against the ship for 7 long days. Elizabeth, scared but curious, found comfort in one thing. She watched The Little Princess, a Shirley Temple movie, again and again in the ship's tiny cinema. That small screen sparked something in her. She wanted to act. 5 months later, on 3rd September 1939, Britain declared war on Germany. Churchill had been right, and the family's life completely changed. They sold their London home for just $5,000. In Los Angeles, they had to cut meat from dinner just to save 25 cents a day. But Elizabeth had already come close to death even earlier. At age 3, in December 1935, she got a terrible case of pneumonia. It was so bad that doctors told her parents to prepare for the worst. She spent 8 days in an oxygen tent at Great Ormond Street Hospital in London. Her fever hit 104 degrees, and she lost 4 pounds in a week. She survived, but her lungs never fully recovered. That illness came back to haunt her in 1961, and again in 1990, both times nearly killing her. After that first fight for her life, someone gave her a gold St. Christopher medal, and she kept it with her for the next 70 years on every film set. Even when she was a baby, there was something special about Elizabeth. Nurses thought she was wearing eyeliner when she was born because her eyes had 2 rows of lashes. It turned out to be a rare condition called dystichiasis, caused by a tiny error in one of her genes. Most people with it have problems, but Elizabeth didn't. Her lashes only made her more striking. Later, MGM's top cameraman discovered that her violet-colored eyes weren't just unusual. They had more pigment than normal, which made them glow under Hollywood lights. When she auditioned for Lassie Come Home in 1942, the makeup team tried to remove her mascara, only to realize there was none. The lashes were real. Some joked that each lash earned her $1,000 over the years. In October 1940, Elizabeth was tested by Universal Studios for The Little Princess remake, but they rejected her. They thought her British accent sounded too fancy. But she didn't give up. She came back and talked about her pony, Betty, for 90 seconds. She named 15 parts of the horse's bridle without missing a beat. That short talk earned her a 6-month contract. She was just 8 years old. They asked her to grow taller, lose baby fat, and even suggested plucking her eyebrows. She trained hard, learning to switch between British and American accents perfectly by March 1941. It was a skill she used all her life. Her first movie was There's One Born Every Minute, which came out on 6th of November 1942. She earned $100 a week, making $2,500 for 5 weeks of work. But Universal dropped her in March 1943, calling her too mature for kids' roles. Within 2 days, MGM picked her up. They saw what others didn't. They changed her clothes to make her look taller, and even had someone spend 18 hours carefully combing her extra lashes so they wouldn't stick together. That same year, MGM earned $425,000 from her first film, while Elizabeth made just a fraction. It taught her how unfair Hollywood could be. Years later, she'd demand profit shares, including her record $1 million contract for Cleopatra. In 1943, Lassie Come Home became her breakout film. She was 11, and for the first time ever, MGM gave equal billing to a dog and a child. Elizabeth learned how to copy the dog's expressions, and after 29 takes, he finally licked her face on camera. That moment made the movie magic. When it came out on 7 December 1943, her name had 3 times more recognition than it did just 2 years earlier. The movie made $4.5 million and gave Elizabeth her first real taste of fame. A year later, in 1944, she wanted the lead in National Velvet so badly that she lied and said she was 5 feet 4 inches tall. She wasn't, but she spent weeks stretching her body to meet the height requirement. On 23rd August, during a race scene, she was thrown off a horse and broke her back. She was just 12. After 2 weeks in a brace, she returned and did her own stunts. That injury followed her the rest of her life. But the movie made $5.8 million, and she kept the horse until it died in 1956. In 1946, she filmed Courage of Lassie in freezing temperatures in Washington. She was 14 and already being called Our Garbo by the director. They used real war shells for scenes, and when the dog got scared, Elizabeth would calm him down by softly reciting Psalm 23. That moment was caught on film and helped promote the movie. When it was released on 12th of October 1946, it made $3.2 million and earned her the title of Box Office Baby Star for the year. By 1947, she was 15 and filming Life with Father. The director offered her $1,500 a week, but she and her mother pushed for more and got $3,500. That same year, during costume fittings, the director told her she was too fat. She was 5'2" and 118 pounds. Her mother fought back in the press. Despite the drama, the movie made $6.5 million and got 4 Oscar nominations. Elizabeth only had 2 scenes, but she stood out. That salary battle led MGM to change how they paid young stars in 1948. In 1949, she filmed Little Women. At just 16, her body was changing fast, and they had to keep adjusting her costumes. Her co-star, June Allison, got annoyed and joked that Elizabeth was stealing attention. They ended up clashing behind the scenes, even hiding pastries in costumes. But their tension made the film better. When it came out on tented March 1950, most audiences said Elizabeth's character was the most memorable. Girls across America copied her hairstyle, and Amy Curls became a trend. That same year, just 10 days after her 17th birthday, she filmed Conspirator and had her first on-screen kiss with 37-year-old Robert Taylor. People called it uncomfortable and even disturbing. The movie flopped. MGM lost $804,000, and studio execs started doubting her. They quietly canceled the sequel. Elizabeth later said it was her first adult role and her first big failure. But that failure led to something new. The studio paired her with Montgomery Clift for her next movie, hoping they'd make magic. In October 1950, while filming A Place in the Sun, 18-year-old Elizabeth fell in love with Clift. He was 30, gay, and confused by his feelings for her. They met secretly at his cabin. When a gossip reporter got close to exposing the affair, MGM created fake photos showing chaperones everywhere. The cover-up worked, and Elizabeth's image stayed clean. The movie came out on 14th of August 1951, won 6 Oscars, and made $114 million when adjusted for inflation. It saved her career. When Clift crashed his car in 1956, she was the first person at his side. In 1952, she went to England to film Ivanhoe. She was pregnant by then-husband Michael Wilding. During a scene with horses, she collapsed and lost the baby. Filming stopped for 9 days. MGM told the press she was just tired, but the truth leaked in a call sheet dated 3rd of April. Despite her pain, she returned and finished the movie. Ivanhoe became MGM's top-grossing film of the year with $11 million. But that moment marked the start of her long struggle with health and a work ethic that never faded. By 1954, Elizabeth had changed. For the last time I saw Paris, she didn't want to play just a pretty girl. She sent the director a 12-page letter asking for stronger scenes. She wanted to yell, argue, and feel real. The studio boss said no, but she threatened to walk. She won. That film opened on 18th of November 1954 and brought in over 820,000 people in its first 5 weeks. It made $106 million adjusted for inflation and proved she wasn't just glamour anymore. Later that same year, in Rhapsody, her dresses were so tight that her waist was measured at just 19 inches. One screening in Iowa caused such a stir that a local group called the gowns lewd. MGM sent out shawls and even cropped the film to hide the neckline. But controversy brought success. Sales soared. Stores sold out of Rhapsody blue dresses, and fashion magazines couldn't get enough. Elizabeth Taylor wasn't just a movie star anymore. She was a symbol, a force, and a legend in the making. In May 1955, Elizabeth Taylor was just 23 when she arrived in Marfa, Texas, to begin filming a movie called Giant. The director, George Stevens, was known for being tough. He told the crew he wanted to break her spirit. He made her repeat scenes so many times that she got sick, and filming kept getting delayed. Then, on September 30th, 1955, right after finishing his last scene, her co-star James Dean died in a terrible car crash. The news hit the set in the middle of the night. Stevens still asked Elizabeth to come back the very next morning to finish her close-up shots, this time acting across from a stand-in. The movie ended up being over 3 hours long and finally premiered on October 10th, 1956. Stevens won an Oscar for Best Director in 1957, but Elizabeth didn't even get a nomination. That stung deeply. It made her more determined than ever to take on bold, emotional roles. Years later, in 2005, the film was added to the National Film Registry for being historically important. On May 12, 1956, while filming Raintree County, Elizabeth invited her friend Montgomery Clift over for dinner. After he left her home that night, he crashed his car into a telephone pole. His face was crushed, and he started choking on his broken teeth. Elizabeth ran to the wreck barefoot, reached through the window, and pulled the teeth from his throat to stop him from suffocating. She saved his life. MGM shut down filming for 9 weeks. The studio had actually taken out a $500,000 insurance policy just in case something went wrong. When they started filming again, Clift's face was partially paralyzed, so Elizabeth made sure to block the camera from showing his injured side. The film finally came out on October 1957. Even though it didn't do great at the box office, her performance as Susanna Drake got her first Oscar nomination at just 25 years old. In February 1958, she started working on Cat on a hot tin roof. Not long after, she caught a cold and stayed home for a few days. That short break saved her life. On March 22, 1958, her husband Mike Todd got on a plane to New York. The plane broke apart in a storm over New Mexico, and everyone on board died. Elizabeth was now 26, widowed, and a mother of 3. She spent weeks in bed, taking pills to numb the pain. MGM eventually pushed her to return to work. On April 28th, she showed up still dressed in black, hiding mourning clothes under her costume. The tears in the movie were real. When the film came out on September 17, 1958, it was MGM's biggest hit of the year, even though some people were nervous about the adult themes. She was praised for how raw and powerful she was and got her second Oscar nomination. In March 1959, she started filming Suddenly last summer with Joseph Mankiewicz directing and Katharine Hepburn as her co-star. The movie was based on a strange and disturbing story by Tennessee Williams. Before they even started filming, religious groups were already angry. They threatened to label the movie condemned if it didn't remove certain scenes. Elizabeth sat through meeting after meeting with the censors, fighting to keep the most intense parts in. She also stood her ground against the director when he wanted to film her in a revealing swimsuit. She didn't want to turn it into something cheap. The movie came out on December 22, 1959, with only small changes. Critics said the final scene was shocking and unforgettable. The public couldn't stop talking about it. Elizabeth got her third Oscar nomination, and both the screenplay and Katharine Hepburn were also recognized. It proved that taking risks could bring real rewards. In August 1959, Elizabeth agreed to film Butterfield 8 just to finish her contract with MGM, but she hated the story and said it was only about selling sex. The studio didn't care. They cast her new boyfriend, Eddie Fisher, in the movie, hoping gossip would boost ticket sales. Filming ended right before Christmas, but just a few months later, on March 6, 1961, she collapsed in London with severe pneumonia. Doctors had to cut into her throat to save her life. The surgery left a scar and kept her in the hospital for weeks. Photos of her with bandages ran all over the world just as the Oscars were being decided. On April 17, 1961, she won Best Actress while still recovering in the hospital. Shirley MacLaine, who lost, joked that she had lost to a tracheotomy. Elizabeth never watched the movie again. Still, it made a lot of money and finally freed her from the studio contract that had controlled her since she was a child. The film earned over $7.5 million in the U.S. alone. When Cleopatra premiered on June 12, 1963, it had already made history by spending more money than any film before it. Elizabeth was paid $1 million up front, plus 10% of the profits. The total cost of the movie reached $44 million, which would be more than $450 million today. It nearly bankrupted the studio. Fox had to fire its CEO, take emergency bank loans, and even sell off land that later became Century City in Los Angeles. Although the film made the most money that year, it took 10 years and several re-releases just to break even. The real firestorm began in March 1962, when Elizabeth and her co-star Richard Burton were caught kissing off-camera. The Vatican called it erotic vagrancy and said she was a bad influence on her children. U.S. congressmen wanted her banned under moral laws. Even President Kennedy made jokes about her. Paparazzi flooded the streets of Rome, following her everywhere. The scandal boosted the studio's publicity by hundreds of thousands of dollars. What the studio couldn't buy in ads, the scandal gave them for free. On March 4, 1961, during the London shoot, she had collapsed with pneumonia and needed emergency surgery to keep her breathing. The scar from that surgery became famous. She even wore low-cut dresses that showed it. When she won the Oscar for Butterfield 8, some said she got sympathy votes. Academy records showed she won by just 69 votes. Fox had to pay the hospital bills and rebuild the ruined sets. But Elizabeth wore that scar with pride. It became a sign of what she'd survived. She wore 65 different costumes in Cleopatra, including one that weighed 40 pounds and was made of real gold. It was so heavy, they had to attach wires to take pressure off her shoulders. She fainted twice wearing it. Doctors gave her limits on how long she could wear the outfits and made her wear ice packs under them. Fashion magazines later said eyeliner sales and jewelry sales jumped because of her. That famous cape sold in 2012 for nearly $60,000. After Cleopatra, she and Burton stayed in the spotlight. They started filming The VIPs on November 18, 1962. Their new contract gave them $1.5 million plus a share of the profits. But behind the scenes, they fought constantly. One time, Burton smashed a mirror after a fight. Between 1963 and 1973, they made 11 movies together, made over $1 billion in today's money, and divorced twice. They bought yachts, planes, and diamonds worth millions, but their love was as chaotic as their careers. Studios wanted their fame, but feared their fights. Back in 1950, when she was just 18, Elizabeth married hotel heir Conrad Hilton Jr. MGM, spent a fortune on the wedding. calling it the event of the century. But within weeks, he started gambling and drinking heavily. She said he hit her during their honeymoon. By December, she filed for divorce. And by January 1951, it was final. It shocked her fans. Her popularity dropped sharply that year, but she left the marriage with a diamond ring and Hilton stock worth around $120,000 today. In 1952, she married Michael Wilding, a British actor who was 20 years older. They had 2 sons together, but his career started to fall apart. In January 1957, she started showing off Mike Todd's private plane, painted pink with her name on it, even though she was still married to Wilding. He filed for divorce in July, and just 35 days later, she married Todd. Columnists called it the fastest husband swap in Hollywood. Todd gave her a ruby necklace worth more than Wilding made in a year. Despite the scandal, her next film was a huge hit. On March 21, 1958, Todd's private plane crashed into the mountains of New Mexico. It exploded on impact. Elizabeth had stayed home because she had bronchitis. She said later that a cold had saved her life. When the burned wreckage was returned, she collapsed. Not long after, she started seeing Eddie Fisher, who was married to Debbie Reynolds. On May 22nd, Fisher left his wife and 2 kids. The press attacked Elizabeth. Radio stations stopped playing Fisher's songs. Still, when they got married in May 1959, it was shown on national TV and watched by 28 million people. She met Richard Burton on the set of Cleopatra in 1962. They were both drinking heavily by then. They got married in 1964 and stayed together through wild fights, rehab visits, and massive spending. Burton once paid over $1 million for a single diamond. In 1967, police fined them for a hotel fight. Elizabeth tried to take her life twice in 1973. They divorced in 1974, remarried in 1975, and split for good in 1976. They said their only addiction stronger than alcohol was each other. In May 1969, while rehearsing for the only game in town, she collapsed from heavy bleeding. Doctors discovered fibroids and early-stage cervical disease. She needed an emergency hysterectomy and received 14 pints of blood. Her husband Burton gave her a huge diamond to comfort her, placing it on her pillow. She cried for hours. She later said it felt like the end of ever having children. She slipped into depression and ended up at a hospital that fall. Just over 3 months later, she was back on the red carpet, smiling for cameras, but hiding her pain. When Elizabeth Taylor launched her perfume White Diamonds on September 12, 1991, she sprayed it in a department store, and by Christmas, it was making $30 million a month. Over the years, it earned $1.5 billion, more than all her movies combined. But the truth was, she didn't just wear it for beauty. She told Larry King she kept it in every purse to cover up the smell of painkillers. At one point, she was taking over 50 pills a day. She was testing perfume samples while in rehab at the Betty Ford Center. Even though she was trying to get clean, her perfume had one of the strongest scent formulas ever made. It became her way of coping. But in 2011, she made a promise that 20% of all future profits would go to AIDS care. Something she once used to survive became something that helped others live. After her close friend Rock Hudson died on October 2, 1985, Elizabeth took action. Just 16 days later, she stood in a Beverly Hilton ballroom and raised $1.3 million in one night for AIDS Project Los Angeles. Soon after, she co-founded AMFAAR, a leading AIDS research group. On May 8, 1990, during the first big AIDS hearing in Congress, they expected doctors to speak. Instead, it was Elizabeth in a bright pink suit, slamming charts on the table and calling out lawmakers for their silence. One senator whispered she was immoral, but she didn't back down. Her speech worked. Government AIDS funding jumped from $819 million in 1989 to $2.1 billion by 1993. Even when insurance companies tried to punish her for speaking out by raising her premiums, she refused to stop. She joked, "If they drop me, I'll insure myself with my jewelry." In 1991, She created her own foundation to help even more. Elizabeth first entered rehab on December 5, 1983. But on July 6, 1988, she went back after friends found her unconscious beside an empty Demerol bottle. She was 56 and the first huge star to ever admit they'd relapsed. "I flunked sobriety, so I'm repeating the course," she told reporters. She joined 42 group sessions and publicly read a 14-page confession. She admitted forging doctor prescriptions and bribing drivers to pick up pills from 5 different pharmacies. That honesty made a huge difference. Rehab enrollment went up 27% after she left, and that's where she met Larry Fortensky, a construction worker in the wood shop. He made her laugh. That meeting would change both of their lives. On October 6, 1991, they got married at Michael Jackson's Neverland Ranch. Jackson paid $1 million just for security. One photographer parachuted into the garden during the ceremony. Elizabeth wore a $25,000 yellow dress. Larry, 20 years younger, wore a $165 suit from Men's Warehouse. The press called him a construction Cinderella, but Elizabeth kept things in control. She wrote into their wedding papers that if they divorced before 5 years, he'd get $1 million. No more, no less. They officially split on October 31, 1996, just 5 weeks after the deadline. Larry later said he still had the boombox she gave him in rehab, and it still played the same morning song every day. On February 3, 1997, doctors found a brain tumor near Elizabeth's left ear. To keep the press away, they checked her into Cedars-Sinai under the fake name L. Spencer. On February 20th, they used a new 3D brain probe to remove the 2.5 cm tumor. It took 3 hours. After she woke up, she told her doctors they could hold a press conference in the hallway. Her doctor even held the tumor in a jar to prove she didn't have cancer. Within 2 months, Elizabeth used the experience to help others, filming a public message telling women to take migraines seriously. That spring, donations to the hospital jumped by 400%. She had already lived through so much: a tracheotomy in 1961, almost drowning in 1965, a broken spine in 1976, and severe pneumonia in 1990. People started calling her the Cat with 9 Lives. She wore that nickname with pride. In November 2004, Elizabeth learned she had congestive heart failure. Her heart was too weak. In February 2009, doctors replaced a valve using cow tissue, but even that wasn't enough. Her heart could only pump at half the normal strength. From then on, she took 2 green oxygen tanks everywhere. She even gave them names, Fred and Ginger, and joked that they matched her eye color. But her condition was serious. For someone in their late 70s with heart failure, most don't live more than 2.3 years. Elizabeth beat the odds for over 2 years, but by April 2010, paparazzi photos showed how bad it had gotten. Her legs were so swollen that her ankles were twice their usual size. People always talked about Elizabeth's beauty, but few knew how much her back had suffered. In 1944, while filming National Velvet, she fell off a horse and hurt her spine. That injury was never treated right and became worse over time. She broke her back 5 times in her life and had to have 2 surgeries to fix it. She also had scoliosis, which twisted her spine so badly that even standing was painful. By 2002, she used a bright blue wheelchair she called the Liz Rod. Some magazines made fun of it, but leaked X-rays later showed her spine was severely bent. She told Larry King that she could only move around by taking 80 milligrams of OxyContin every day, 10 times what doctors now consider dangerous. She laughed once, saying, "Diamonds are forever, vertebrae aren't." On February 12, 2001, ABC aired a funny movie called These Old Broads. Most people thought it was just comedy, but for insiders, it was much deeper. The script, written by Carrie Fisher, let Elizabeth joke on screen about stealing a husband, making fun of her real-life scandal with Debbie Reynolds and Eddie Fisher in 1959. Elizabeth was very sick during filming. Oxygen tanks were kept just out of frame, and sometimes her blood oxygen would drop so low that alarms went off. Once, when her oxygen hit a dangerous level, She told them, "Roll again before I croak. This gag is gold." Almost 20 million people watched, but very few knew she could only film in short bursts. That would be the last time she acted. When Michael Jackson died on June 25, 2009, Elizabeth was devastated. The next day, she wrote 14 tweets adding up to more than 2,100 words, calling him her true love. What no one knew was that just 2 weeks later, doctors placed her on a 72-hour psychiatric hold. She had taken 24 Vicodin pills in less than 2 days, and her blood alcohol was high. Records leaked in 2014 showed she was deeply depressed. She told her doctors, "If I talk, they'll headline me as the next tragedy." She refused to make a public statement and only opened up one time in 2010, saying in a magazine, "I tried to follow Michael, but God wasn't finished with me." On January 31, 2011, Elizabeth was rushed to the hospital again. Her lungs were filled with fluid. She stayed there for 52 days. On March 23, 2011, she died at 1:28 in the morning, at the age of 79. The funeral was held the next afternoon at Forest Lawn. The ceremony started exactly 15 minutes late. A note in the rabbi's pocket explained it had been planned that way. Elizabeth had said she must be late for her own funeral. Her last words, whispered to a night nurse, were, "Tell Richard I'm on my way." She meant Richard Burton, the love of her life. Years earlier, he had promised to place a letter in her coffin. That letter, written in 1983 and sealed in lavender paper, was gently placed in her hands before they closed the lid. On December 13, 2011, Christie's held an auction of her jewelry. Experts were stunned. The total reached $156.7 million, 4 times more than any other single-owner jewelry sale in history. One necklace alone, a 16th century pearl once worn by Spanish queens, sold for $11.8 million. Elizabeth had decided all the profits would go to AIDS research. Just 2 weeks after the auction, her foundation funded a shipment of HIV medicine to Zimbabwe. It was a turning point. Magazines that once tracked her marriages were now showing charts about the lives her diamonds were saving. Back in 1983, Elizabeth sat down with Barbara Walters and told the world, "I'm an alcoholic and a pill addict." That moment changed everything. 50 million Americans watched her say it live. Before that, stars were sent to quiet exhaustion clinics with no real truth. But Elizabeth's honesty helped people see addiction as a real illness. Rehab centers reported more patients. The media started covering it differently. Even the American Medical Association praised her for helping the country take addiction seriously. When she died in 2011, her foundation didn't stop. The Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation kept going. Between 2011 and 2025, it gave over $20 million to 700 projects in 45 countries. The help went to places most people ignored, like mobile testing vans in small towns and special clinics for transgender patients in Kenya. In 2019, the foundation funded free test kits for men in Mississippi, and it led to a big rise in early HIV diagnoses. In 2023, it even helped push Congress to add $10 million to HIV research. Even in death, Elizabeth Taylor was still fighting, still helping, still shining.